and I belong to the Tampa Bay Computer Society. We're located in Clearwater, Florida, right across the bay from Tampa, and it's a beautiful day today. The windows are open, it's nice, and we're blessed. I wanted to talk about what to do with your old XP computer. We know Microsoft is going to stop supporting Windows XP in April. What do you do with the old box? The hardware makes it impossible to upgrade to Windows 8 or Windows 7, and there's probably no value in trying to donate it to someone. Trying to run XP forever on it could lead to problems. So I've got another solution. Why not take that old, slow Windows box and put Linux on it? And since I come from a Windows background, I talk Linux for mostly Windows users. And hopefully we can take that old XP computer and change it from a slow machine into something very usable. You are in my target audience, all user groups are, but my target audience really consists of those people who were former Windows users and are considering using Linux. Maybe you're an enthusiastic power user at work or home. Maybe you want to build on your Windows skills. Maybe you're someone new to Linux, maybe even someone reluctant to try. But here's something maybe I can do. And maybe you're just an adventurer, someone that wants to see what Linux can actually do. Yes, the old XP computer is super slow. Microsoft support ends April 8th. But why would I want to learn Linux? Here's a recent article taken like about a week ago. And this person recommends down in the second or third paragraph that really Microsoft is hoping you'll upgrade to Windows 8. But his suggestion is, why not use Linux? Several articles like this have recently appeared. I picked out an old XP computer I had laying here. It's an old EEE PC. It's got the Atom processor in it. It's got 1 gig of RAM. It's got a wireless connection, and it has 3 USB ports, but no CD or DVD drive. You know, this could be almost any computer made in the last 15 years. So we are going to look at some of the advantages of Windows. I've been fortunate in my years of work. I'm retired now, but when I worked, I had about 19 years of supporting Microsoft and their products, and it proved very beneficial to me. Windows has the advantage of being a standard. Nearly everyone uses it, and lots of people can try to help you with your problems. You've got much better support than any other operating system. And if all else fails, you can go to the local computer shop or call Microsoft, and you can get paid support that's available. You're never really out. And Microsoft also has better hardware support. If I wanted to sell something in Best Buy or Tiger Direct, it better work on Windows or it isn't going to sell. Linux has some definite advantages too, mainly its cost. Software and licenses are zero. It's hard to beat zero cost. Install Linux on as many computers as you like. You can take the same disk that you use or the same USB device and install it on as many computers as you like. And it's all within the licensing. No application costs, no software costs. There are free and open source programs out there that run on Linux, and they don't cost money. I'll show you more. Better stability. The uptime on Linux systems far exceeds Windows. Linux systems have been known to operate for a year or more, never requiring a reboot. Most updates, when they come down, if it doesn't involve a kernel, do not require a reboot also. So it's got better stability, better file organization, defragging's never required, files are organized better on your hard disk, and a benefit: no antivirus protection is needed. Partially that's because we're a small footprint using Linux. We're less than 1% of the population, and people who want to target viruses aren't going to go after the 1%, they're going to go after the 99%. Let's talk operating systems a minute. Operating system is the heart and soul of your computer. It actually stands between you and your hardware, and it becomes an interface. It remembers where everything is, but it's an interface between you and your computer. It's quite valuable. We need an operating system on every computer, and we've had several over the years. Most of them all go back and relate back to UNIX. UNIX was the granddaddy operating system, and it started in the 1970s, and it started in the Bell Labs. And people still sell UNIX today. IBM makes a lot of their profit off supervising and running and licensing UNIX systems. The old Sun Solaris, SCO, HP, many people are in that field. I wanted to show you how things relate. I know this graph is hard to see, but if you look in the center, you'll see the yellow box shows the UNIX Bell Labs version over time. You'll see it started in 1971, goes up to about 1990. But you'll see other systems have branched off. Toward the bottom, you'll see how the different proprietary UNIX systems were split off from the main Bell Lab. If you look going up, there's a whole BSD family, Berkeley Software Development, that started up, and these systems still are out there today. FreeBSD, NetBSD, OpenBSD, they're out there. It's something close to Linux, but it's not really Linux. You'll also notice, if you follow down under the BSD, that there was a time when BSD was taken by a company called NextStep. When Steve Jobs was booted from Apple at one point in his career, he went and founded this company called NextStep. And through the development efforts there, they came up with a system that used a lot of what we use today, using icons. They really developed something close to the Mac operating system at that time. And then when Jobs came back to Apple, he moved all his Next team over to Apple, and the Mac is what it is today. A lot because it's based back on NextStep, which is based back on Berkeley, which was based on UNIX. you'll see there's another line at the bottom where there's some Minix was distribution. It's still around today, but it's not popular. And you'll see a name in the blue, Richard Stallman. Richard Stallman started a free software movement back in the mid-1980s. I'll show you more about him in a minute. And then you'll see the GNU Linux systems going out. And you'll see one box above the project GNU. There was a time when Microsoft was producing a product based on UNIX. It was called Xenix. And back in the days when we were learning, going from Novell to Microsoft networking, we used Xenix to link things between computers. Xenix had a short life and doesn't exist any longer. So I wanted to show you that relationship. And here are the two open source heroes. Richard Stallman on the left is a speaker. He still goes around today. He's stationed at MIT up in Boston, and he speaks all over the world on free and open source software. He is a proponent of not paying for software. He has got into some verbal and written debates with software vendors because he calls them mercenary. And he would like to find a way that things could be for free. Linus Torvalds is the young man who is credited with developing the Unix operating system. Linus used the ideas of Stallman when he couldn't figure out how to make the Linux system truly operational and work. He asked for help from other people, help for free. And people wrote to him and helped him solve his problems, and pretty soon he had an operating system. And that is the way Linux has developed over the years. Linus still owns a copyright to Unix, to Linux kernel, and he updates it all the time. He lives in this country now. He was from Finland. He lives here. I wanted to just go through these smorgasbord of my Linux terms. Sometimes I'll say a distribution. There's lots of different kinds of Linux out there. Usually we call them distributions or distros. Packages are programs with their dependencies. Lots of times packages require dependencies. Often in the Windows world, that's taken up by the files that come down with the package, and Linux is taken up a different way, but the dependencies work. And sometimes I'll say a program when I mean software or application, and sometimes I'll say GUI instead of desktop environment. User, you're always a secondary user on Linux. You're never the admin, or which we call the root user. You're never the root user. You're always a secondary user. That's helpful because it prevents you from breaking the system. And sometimes I'll say memory in place of RAM or vice versa. And sometimes I'll say web address instead of URL. And sometimes I use the term OS instead of operating system. Root is, there's two terms for root. One of them is the system admin, and the other one is the absolute bottom of the Linux partition on your hard drive. And we call that the root, and it's always symbolized by a /. And we know from the Windows world, we always use backslashes to indicate drives, but in Unix, Linux, it's always a /. So I guess we have those. I wanted to show you Linux forks. This is called forking. I know you can't read this, but you can see how one thing started on the left and how many things developed over time. This is the way open source software works. When somebody has a better idea and can't convince the owner of a project that maybe the new idea is better, they go off and they form their own branch and they make another product, maybe much like the first one, and maybe they take users away from the first one. That's called forking. But you know, it brings us the best of software, and maybe it doesn't always help the people who are developing software, but since they're not doing it for a living, only their pride can be hurt if users leave. The Linux we're going to install is LXLE. And the reason I picked LXLE is that it's made for older computers. And you'll see that on there above the graphic, they say revive that old PC. This is one that's made particularly for that purpose. At this time, LXLE appears to be the best of breed for Linux distros using minimal system resources. Others include Lubuntu, Peppermint, and Zorin, but I happen to prefer this one. All the distros install the same if you wish to try others. Large resource Linuxes such as Linux Mint or Ubuntu or SUSE function poorly on limited hardware. LXLE is the one we're going to choose to install today. So, if you're ready to try Linux, there are 4 installation steps. The first is planning, where and how you will install Linux. Will you install it alone, alongside Windows? It's even possible to install it inside Windows, but I don't recommend that. You need to choose a computer in which you're going to install the Linux, and whether you're going to install it as a DVD or as a USB device. You have to download a file, an ISO or an image file from the internet, from the site where you want to make your system. You need to burn the ISO to a DVD or CD or USB. Unfortunately, LXLE is too big to fit on the CD, so it's either DVD or USB. And the last one is run the install program. I always try to use a wired Ethernet cable when I do this because it makes life a lot easier if I know I've got a secure Ethernet connection. Now, we already spoke about the planning. I need to download the image. The best place to go for images or to find information on Linux distributions is distrowatch.com. It's been around for years, and everyone kind of looks to it for finding the best information about Linux distros. Or you can use Google. That works too. Choose the distro you want to install, and then you have to choose whether you want 32 or 64 bits. Since we're talking older hardware, I'd sure recommend the 32 because 64 is not going to work in most places, and I haven't really witnessed great speed improvement with 64 over 32. Download or use a torrent from a safe site, download the file, and save this ISO to your hard disk drive. But remember, the ISO must be unpacked before you use it. Next slide. We have to burn the image. Now, there's tools for burning an ISO to an optical disk. Windows Vista, Windows 7, and Windows 8, if you right-click the ISO file, it will give you on the context menu a way that you can burn the image to another device. So it comes automatically on Windows Vista 7 or 8. If you're going to do it in Windows XP, you need an external program in order to burn the image. Nero, which came with lots of CD and DVD drives, works fine for this. Otherwise, there's some open source programs one's called Image Burn, which is very easy to use, and another super program is K3B. The best tool I found to put an ISO on the USB stick, though, is UNetBootin. And UNetBootin is available for Windows and for Linux computers. And it looks exactly the same either way. When you get the UNetBootin and run it on your Windows or Linux computer, we don't use the top part of the screen. Click over at that where it says number 1 on the radio button for disk image, and since you're going to have an ISO, you don't need to click there. Come over to number 2, click the 3 dots, navigate through your file manager to the ISO file, come down, find your USB drive, number 3, and then finally click OK. Do not click the Show All Drives over on the far left, 2 lines up from the bottom. It's very possible to write to your local hard disk drive, which will not do you any good. You should put the USB drive in before you run the UNetBootin. And it takes 10 minutes or so to write the image over to the memory stick. After you run the UNetBootin, you're ready to install Linux. Now, when you start your computer, you have to turn it off, turn it back on, have the USB stick in, and hopefully there's some key that comes up there's a boot screen that says push this button to select the boot drive. If that's the case, you'll get what's shown on the upper screen where it says USB generic flash disk. If not, you're going to have to go into your computer and you're going to have to go into the BIOS and set the boot order so that the computer will boot first from USB or DVD before the hard disk drive. It's not hard to find, but you're going to look for something called boot order in the BIOS. After you select the USB drive, you'll get the UNetBootin screen. It will default, and you'll see at the bottom it says will boot in 4 seconds. If you do nothing, it just will boot. You can choose to calm down and use the live boot. You can come down one. You can force a lower graphic version if you're having problems. And normally, I just let it start on its own. So it starts, and you'll get this splash screen from LXLE. If you look under the E halfway down the screen, you'll see an activity wheel that spins around that tells you that something's happening. And finally, you'll come to a full window of the Linux operating system running from the USB stick. This happens to be LXLE, and there is a menu at the bottom left where you see 3 buttons for, and if you click that 3 button icon, menus pop up and you can pick other options. And you can test things this time on your computer. When you're finally ready to install, you'll notice the icon at the upper left. You'll notice that all you have to do is double click on the button and you'll start the install process. This goes pretty fast. These are the things you need to know in order to install your Linux. It's not bad. You need to know your language, what kind of keyboard, partitioning scheme, time zone, computer name, username, password, auto start. I pushed the button. This is selecting English as a default. There are 2 buttons on the next screen. Preparing to install UNIX. Where the red marks are, there's check boxes. Click both of those check boxes to download updates while installing and install this install third-party software so you can run a DVD. It's licensed properly, but it's not in the free Linux. So you need to install the third party. If you did not connect to a network wirelessly before, it will try to hook you up to a network. It will look at all your wireless networks, try to hook you up. Again, it's easier if you do it with the Ethernet cable. Then we have to pick what installation type. You'll notice the top one says install Ubuntu alongside of something else, probably Windows. That would be one option for you. The second option, erase the disk and install Ubuntu. We're actually installing LXLE, but they use the Ubuntu installer. And that was the easiest option is erase the disk and install Linux. The one on the bottom, something else, will bring you up other screens that have more complexity. I'm not going to go into these right now. Once you pick your installation scheme, you have to find your time zone. Mine is New York. And then you need to pick what kind of keyboard you have. And mine defaults to English, so it works well. Then you pick a username. You'll notice when I put my name in with a capital letter for Stu, you'll notice that it took for my computer's name, it dropped that to lowercase and it dropped my username to lowercase. Linux is very particular about upper and lowercase, and we have to observe those rules. It's just a lot easier logging in with all lowercase. And you choose a password. I chose a weak one, and you need to type it in the second time. If they both agree, you get that green check mark after the second one. And I chose to log in automatically. You can require the password to log in. Since I don't share my computer, I figured automatically was fine. Encrypt my home folder. If you encrypt a drive, beware, because if you forget or lose the encryption key, everything on the drive will be worthless, and there are no tools to correct for that. So you be careful if you use encryption. Have a good reason or risk it all. You'll see some screens go by that say it's almost copying, configuring, and finally you'll get an installation is complete. You push the button to restart now, and finally you'll come up with a whole Linux distribution on your XP computer. And you can look around and you can see lots of different things. If I click that menu, that triangle button on the right, if I go to accessories, it pulls up the second column here of different things I have to do. Image viewers, weather, I can find things to do. If I look to the next one, it's a graphic menu. And there's lots of graphics. I didn't pull the games up because there's a ton of them. I'll show you that in a minute. If you look under Windows activities or online activities, you'll see I've added some things like Dropbox and Google Chrome and Thunderbird and TeamViewer to this basic LXLE configuration. But that's what I'm going to show you today. The whole LibreOffice is installed. That means the writer, the math, the Impress, which is like PowerPoint, the Calc, which is like Excel, and the base program, the whole database program. Everything's here. And if under the audio-visual things, you'll see Audacity. The best editor for audio that there is installed by default. And you'll see that there's a lot of things here under System Utilities and Preferences. And what do I need to keep this running? Well, I would say it's pretty easy to do. You need to update things as they come out. And there's an update manager. It will keep things straight for you. All you have to do is click install the updates now and then, just like we used to do with the Microsoft things as they came down. We'll find in Linux the updates tend to be more, but they're much smaller, so they go by very rapidly. And only very, very seldom do you need to reboot the computer. Wi-Fi. I've had some issues with Wi-Fi, and I wanted to mention it here. Some wireless adapters in laptops that are 10 to 15 years old were not really built to the same specs that they are today. And sometimes they just never do properly work, the old wireless adapters. I found this $10 device that you can buy from Newegg, and I keep this in my toolkit that I take to special interest group meetings, and I've plugged it in several people's computers, and it solves their wireless problems. And they go out and pay $10 and they are hooked up. It certainly is a lot cheaper than buying a new computer, and it makes for a reliable connection. I put this on my grandkids' computers and they're still using it. I want to talk about partitioning. Most distros allow partitioning on the install, and I kind of skipped over that when we went by it. Linux uses ext format. It's not NTFS and it's not FAT. There's a root partition, and again I mentioned it's a /, not a /. And Linux will always install a swap partition on your hard disk drive when it installs Linux. The swap partition normally is 2 times your RAM of the computer. So if you've got 1 gigabyte, normally the swap partition would be 2. Notice the partitions are numbered. They're not lettered like they are in Windows. And there's a great partitioning tool in LXLE. It's in most Linuxes. It's called gparted. And it's a partition magic clone that's really on steroids. I clicked something wrong here. No.
I'll get it back for you.
Okay. Thank you.
Let's see.
I click. This is a USB drive we made for a Linux 101 class we did in November at our club. I made these out of USB sticks so we could run it in a Windows lab without disturbing the Windows computers, so we could run directly from the USB. I made the whole stick was 16 gigabytes, which Gparted says was really more like 14.54 gigabytes, but we divided it up and made the first 7 gigabytes where I installed Linux. I went to the opposite end and made an extended drive, and I put the swap file up at the top, which is the 1.86 gigs, and I took the remaining space to use as user space. And these sticks work very good for us. Sometimes you have to run terminal in Linux, but very seldom. 15 years ago when I started using Linux, you had to use a terminal all the time. And that's why somehow Linux was pegged that it was for geeky people. But we aren't that way today. Very seldom do you have to run the terminal. I want to talk about Grub. Grub is that screen that comes up when you start your computer and will say what you can boot to. I didn't mention before, but when that Grub screen comes up, the only keys that are operational, and it tells you at the bottom of the window, are the up and down arrow keys and the enter key. No mouse works there. But I wanted to show you that Windows, if you install Linux on top of Windows, it will always make Windows the last entry on the list, and it will promote itself to the top. There's some things you can do to try to change that, but there's some recovery modes you'll see for each different Linux kernel that's listed there. You shouldn't need the recovery modes, but if you get in trouble, it's nice to have it. There are some tools to make that Grub menu look a lot prettier, like shown on the bottom, but they're experimental things and they can cause grief. So edit Grub with caution. And there's a version of Linux out there called Rescatux that might repair a damaged Grub. It's worth a try. One or two last things. You cannot run Windows programs on Linux. So if there is a favorite program you have and it only runs Windows, beware, because it's something that you cannot run on Linux. You might find an open source program that will work and do the same job. And there is a Wine program, and Wine is an acronym that stands for Wine is not an emulator. But Wine will run some Windows programs, but very few, and very few to their full extent, and never something like Microsoft Office. You can find Linux in lots of applications. In fact, the router I'm using today to talk to you is a Tomato router, which is a Linux flashed to an old Linksys router. My two SIGs I host, the free and open source and the Linux SIGs of the Tampa Bay Computer Society, I keep a website up. It's called fossig.com, FOSSSIG.com, and my email address is there. And I have some references. My references are I've used throughout the program, and I think they'll get you to what you want. The one second to the bottom is LXLE. You can find their website on the net, and you'll find DistroWatch. Did not make my list, but all you have to go to distrowatch.com. I guess, oh, there was something else. Does your user group have a FOSS and a Linux SIG? Like most user groups, our club is composed mostly of Windows users. Tolerance for alternatives began very weak, but has dramatically improved over the years. Last year, I was asked to speak twice at our general monthly meetings, once on open source and once on Linux, and was well received by the larger audience. In November, the club allowed us to set up and use their Windows 7, 8 classroom and their computers for a 5-week class using the thumb drives. I know my attitude towards the user group has become much more positive over time. I encourage all the user groups to begin Linux and open source SIGs. We should encourage our members to use lightweight, free, open source software and hardware and not be another marketing tool for Best Buy, Microsoft, or Apple. Our Tampa Bay Computer Society's free and open source SIG just turned 6 years old, and our Linux SIG is beginning its 4th year. We have a loyal small group of 15 to 20 members who often attend both meetings monthly. And I've recently posted this and other presentations on Google Drive, and I'm sure it will be posted here. I haven't had time to look at the questions. So Huey, if you could help me, if I have questions I should talk about, I will be glad to do it.
Well, it looks like right now there's only one, but possibly while we're talking, people might type in another one. Michael Charney says the latest version of LXLE is 1204.4. Are there any major differences between the 8.x version that you're showing and 1204.4?
That's based on the Ubuntu LTS kernel. That's that long-term kernel. That means that this version of Linux you put on your computer will be updated through 2017. And if you put on the short-term kernels, they're only supported for 9 months right now. So they used to support them for over a year. Now they've dropped that back to 9 months. So I would think you'd want to use the 1204. It's the long-term LTS.
Paul Becker from Michigan says, when I try to download this LXLE product, it downloads a torrent file. How do I use it to download the XLXE product?
Had this week too. When I started to make this presentation, you could download LXLE just as a regular FTP download. Now they're forcing you to use a torrent. If you're on Windows, take that little torrent file. It's small. I forgot, like 45K or something like that. And then you have to go and download a torrent program and put it on your Windows computer. And the one I used the other night was mu-torrent. It looks like a U, but it's the Greek letter mu torrent. And I got that and downloaded it. And then I used muTorrent and opened up the torrent file, and here came my file down from the internet. And it comes quite rapidly. I'm getting torrent files now to transfer, I'd say in less than 15 minutes, I'm getting 1.4 gigabytes down. So it comes very rapidly, much faster than FTP downloads. There's several out there, and they're all
free. Michael says that BitTorrent is another, I guess, another program that you can use to download it. Yeah. Doesn't, just out of curiosity, don't BitTorrent or torrent programs
security, but
share your computer in some way? Aren't there some security issues you got to be?
You become a part of a user network. You take and you also give away at the same time. But we're only doing it with the one file we're downloading, and it's all checked MD5 sums. So I feel quite secure in using it. If you can help me, Huey, I wanted to swap over to show my desktop. Okay, we'll do that another time. And thanks everyone
I'm afraid we're out of time.
I think Linux is a nice alternative. I really don't. I try not to badmouth Windows. I made a lot of money working and fixing Windows systems over the years. Windows is a good system, but Windows is expensive for lots of our aging users on fixed incomes, and we could just give them something for free that would work. It's just wonderful. And if we can take some of that old hardware laying around and stick LXLE on it, we could give computers away. Thanks for listening, folks.